She had come with a small overnight bag and a nervous smile, expecting nothing more than a quiet dinner and a few stolen hours together. Then the first explosion hit the perimeter, rattling the windows and throwing her against the wall. In the chaos that followed, as alarms screamed and soldiers sprinted for cover, everyone saw her as just a civilian visitor. No one imagined that before dawn, her sniper fire would decide who lived and who didn't. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. Her name was Leah Morgan, and she hated military bases. Not the people, the noise. The constant edge in the air, like something bad was always rehearsing in the shadows. She was only there because of Evan, her boyfriend, who wore his uniform like a second skin and pretended danger was an inconvenience, not a fact of life. Leah had teased him about it as they walked across the tarmac earlier that evening, the desert sky painted in soft oranges and bruised purples. "You'll be safe here," he'd said, squeezing her hand. He believed it. Leah wasn't military, not anymore. That part of her life sat folded away like an old map, still accurate, still dangerous, but rarely unfolded. She told herself she was done with it. Done with the discipline, the waiting, the way your pulse never really slowed. She had promised herself a quieter future. The first blast tore that promise open. Sirens howled. Floodlights snapped on, turning night into harsh white fragments. Soldiers moved with sudden, brutal precision, voices sharp and urgent. Leah was shoved behind a concrete barrier as Evan ran, shouting something she couldn't hear over the chaos. She watched him disappear into smoke and dust, her chest tightening with a fear she hadn't felt in years. Gunfire followed. Closer than it should have been. The base was under attack. Leah crouched low, heart hammering, counting breaths the way she used to. 1, 2, 3. She noticed things without trying: the direction of the wind, the rhythm of the shots, the way the shadows moved when the light swung. Instincts stirred, unwelcome and familiar. She thought she'd never need it again. She was wrong. A group of soldiers rushed past her, dragging a wounded man. Another fell, hit before he could reach cover. Leah pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Around her, other civilians huddled, eyes wide, whispering prayers. She wanted to join them, to stay small and invisible. Then she heard Evan's voice over the radio. Broken, strained. "Snipers on the ridge, pinned down." The words sliced through her. She peeked around the barrier, scanning the dark horizon. There it was, a low rise beyond the fence, barely visible, but wrong somehow. Too still. Too deliberate. Her pulse slowed, mind sharpening as old training slid into place like muscle memory waking from sleep. She spotted the glint first, then the movement. They're elevated, she whispered to no one. 2, maybe 3 shooters. No one was listening. A nearby officer shouted orders, frustration bleeding into his voice. Their own snipers were downrange, out of position. They were blind on the ridge. Leah felt the weight of the moment settle into her bones. She could stay quiet. No one would blame her. She was just visiting. Or she could speak. The moral line was clear and terrifying. If she was wrong, she could make everything worse. If she was right and did nothing, people would die. She stepped forward. "I can help," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The officer stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Ma'am, get back. I'm a trained sniper," she cut in softly. "Former. I know that ridge. I can see them." A beat of silence. Another explosion in the distance. He hesitated, eyes searching her face for bravado, finding none. Only certainty. "Do it," he said. They handed her a rifle that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. She checked it with quick, efficient movements, fingers remembering what her mind had tried to forget. She climbed to a higher vantage point, heart pounding so loud she was sure someone could hear it. The night breathed around her. Dust drifted through the floodlights. Somewhere below, men shouted and moved like a tide pulling back, then surging forward again. Leah lay prone, the ground cool beneath her, brought the scope to her eye. There, one shooter, adjusting position. Another just behind him. She exhaled. The first shot cracked the night open. The man dropped. Confusion rippled across the ridge. Second shot followed, precise, final. The third target tried to flee, and Leah tracked him smoothly, almost gently, until he fell too. The gunfire from the ridge stopped. For a heartbeat, the base seemed to hold its breath. Then the tide turned. Soldiers advanced, coordinated and fierce, now that the threat was neutralized. Cheers didn't erupt not yet, but something shifted. Momentum. Hope. Leah stayed where she was, scanning, covering, making sure. Her hands trembled only after it was over. When Evan finally found her, streaked with dirt and blood that wasn't all his, he stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You saved us," he said hoarsely. She shook her head, tears finally spilling. "I just remembered who I was." At dawn, the base was quiet again, too quiet. The air smelled of smoke and sand and something like relief. Soldiers gathered near the command building, murmurs passing between them. When Leah walked past, conversations paused, heads turned. Respect moved through the crowd like a soft wave. The commander approached her, posture formal, eyes kind. "You turned the tide tonight," he said. "You didn't have to." Leah looked toward the ridge, now harmless in the morning light. "I could not," she replied. Later, as the sun climbed higher, she sat with Evan on the steps outside the barracks. He held her hand like he was afraid she might vanish. She leaned into him, exhausted, heart full in a way that hurt. She had come to visit the man she loved. She'd left remembering herself. Because courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it shows up quietly when no one expects it and chooses to stand anyway. And sometimes, the parts of us we think are gone are only waiting for the moment they needed most. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe to Whispered Words for more mission stories that remind us how ordinary people rise when it matters most.